When I think of the Castan Centre, I think of leadership on business and human rights.
I think of a group of people dedicated to using the law to make a difference in society.
I think about the committed people it has brought together to advance the realisation of human rights.
I think of the legacy of the wonderful Ron Castan QC and how proud he would be of all of the achievements of the world-renowned Human Rights Centre that has the honour of bearing his name.
When I think of the Castan Centre, I think of an international reputation.
Human rights, both internationally and domestically.
When I think of the Castan Centre, I think of the inspirational work of the academics.
When I think of the Castan Centre, I think of academics, students and members of the community working together to promote human rights.
I think of a passionate, driven, dedicated and very knowledgeable group of legal experts fighting hard for human rights and justice everywhere.
I think of the importance of empowering the next generation of human rights lawyers to eradicate all forms of discrimination, inequality and human rights abuses in Australia and around the world.
I think of an organisation made up of fearless advocates doing such important work that is necessary now more than ever before.
I think of invaluable opportunities for students to begin their journey in human rights law.
I think of the amazing depth and breadth of knowledge of the people who work there.
The Castan Centre produces the kind of research that achieves change.
This year, the Monash Law Faculty celebrates the 20th anniversary of Monash University's Castan Centre for Human Rights Law.
I am Professor Kevin Bell, the Director of the Castan Centre for Human Rights Law. Our mission is to carry out research, teaching and policy in the field of international human rights law, especially that which impacts upon the lives of vulnerable people in Australia, in the Asia-Pacific region and throughout the world.
The Castan family was so honoured when the Monash Law Faculty reached out in the year 2000 to name the new Human Rights Centre in honour of our late father's untimely passing. Ron Castan's contribution to Indigenous justice and law reform has endured, and the work of the Castan Centre has honoured this legacy and his memory. The nurturing of the next generation, the scholarly research and the advocacy for human rights are a fitting reflection of Ron's legacy in Australian law.
Formulating a vision for the Castan Centre was in fact a collective effort. Melissa, Sarah, Julie and myself, backed by the then Dean Stephen Parker.
Sarah, Joseph and I became colleagues at Monash Law School in 1996. Our time together at the epicentre of international human rights law solidified our friendship and our shared passion for human rights. We knew that human rights were a force for good across so many facets of life and how human rights should shape the Australian legal landscape.
Fundamentally, the vision was simple and straightforward: to honour Ron Castan's legacy of promoting human rights through thought, ideas and action. Mind you, that gave us a pretty broad canvas upon which to paint, given the width of Ron's professional accomplishments, both inside and outside the law, and the breadth of his personal commitment to the cause.
We saw the opportunity for us together to build and expand upon the expertise of human rights within the faculty.
In those early years, we ranged far and wide, reflecting our individual and collective interests, Indigenous rights and welfare, the Bills of Rights debates in Australia, human rights education in Monash, in Australia and overseas, in Indonesia, Vietnam and Myanmar, as well as exploring new human rights frontiers, such as the role of corporations and social media.
I was part of the Castan Centre for 19 years and its director for 15 years. And it was a great privilege to run a centre named after Australia's greatest human rights lawyer, Ron Castan QC, and also a tremendous privilege to run a centre with such great human rights lawyers and also wonderful dedicated staff.
We thought big, we worked hard and we received support from many people at key moments of the Castan Centre's journey. And I'm immensely proud to be celebrating 20 years today.
If I was to choose one project I'm proud of, I'd probably choose the video project, haveyougothatright.com. Check it out if you haven't already.
The Castan Centre has been instrumental in advocating for the rights of LGBTIQ people in Australia and around the world.
Its achievements include the phenomenal human rights scholars it has attracted, the incredible job it has done in educating the public about human rights, and the high quality and high impact research that its members have produced.
Taking the faculty's world-renowned research and turning it into accessible and impactful policy in the areas of Indigenous affairs, disability, closed environments and much, much more.
The Castan Centre for Human Rights Law
developed a human rights translated guide for business, which has actually shaped how the UN and the world now understands what the role of business is in terms of human rights. It's an enormous contribution.
The advocacy work that the Castan Centre does and its contribution to the human rights dialogue here in Australia is extremely important. Keep it up to another 20 years.
In 2020, we overcame barriers posed by the pandemic to run our first Castan Centre Human Rights Clinic remotely, providing another vehicle through which we prepare the human rights leaders of the future.
During the pandemic, we have carried out research, conducted human rights clinics, organised lectures and seminars, formed important partnerships and made many policy submissions to official inquiries on the human rights of homeless people.
On behalf of the Castan family, congratulations on the 20th anniversary of the Castan Centre for Human Rights Law.